SCP-096 from the SCP Foundation versus an Enderman from Minecraft. Two humanoid horrors that are mostly docile until you look at them in the face, and then they become hell-bent on ending you no matter what. Between these two humanoid horrors, who comes out on top? Let's find out. Now, I have discussed this matchup before in my video, Can SCP-096 Beat the End? So if you want more of the original calculations, I'll leave a link to that video in the description. But anyways, let's begin. Starting with 096, SCP-096 is a tall humanoid creature who is usually docile in most occasions, just sitting in its containment, face down in its arms crying. For what reason? There could be many, but all we do know is that when you look at its face, it becomes one of the most unstoppable threats ever. Now in an endless pursuit to make sure you are dead. Once this creature is enraged, it becomes almost completely unstoppable, being able to tank gunfire and anti-tank missiles, can survive the depths of the Mariana Trench, rip through steel containers, and striker vehicles, with forces exerting over a ton of TNT, reaching into the building level ranges casually. And he has a healing factor that can allow him to heal from anything that doesn't destroy his skeleton, and can break the speed of sound while running. In fact, 096 can travel between the Earth and the Sun within 2 years. This would actually be around Mach 7. And he is able to shift the Sun's orbit to a noticeable effect that causes Earth's orbit to decay due to its closeness. In order to get the Sun this close, during his travels, 096 would have to be traveling up to Mach 67. And 096 can perceive someone looking at him before the light even touches their eyes. This means his perception/reaction speed could be faster than light. And he even has a feat where he can move through stopped time, although I do find this speed a little hard to believe, mainly because it's hard to say if this is truly a speed feat or a natural resistance 096 has. But if this is a speed feat, 096 would have to be infinite in speed in order to run through this, but due to a lack of full understanding of this scenario, I'm not going to guarantee it for its fight. Now going on to the Enderman. An Enderman is a tall humanoid creature that walks around a dimension known as the End, although it can appear in other places. These things are usually docile, but when looked at in the eyes, it becomes the absolute bane of your existence, chasing you down, doing everything it can to make sure you're dead. Now, to figure out how strong they are, we have to look at a couple levels to see a low end and go to the highest end. What they can scale to, though, is how they can compare to Steve's Punch. So, if you haven't seen my last video, Steve's Punch can break down acacia wood trees in 16 punches. This would take around 3,750 kilojoules, and at a middle end, Steve is able to break a diamond block in around 133 punches. This would take around forces of 0.1 tons of TNT per punch to accomplish. And then for the highest possible we could give him in the scaling is destroying netherite. While netherite is only 10 times the hardness of diamonds, it has 200 times the blast resistance. Let's just take this into account for the higher ends just to get a maximum possible level for the Enderman here. But doing this, Steve was able to break this thing in around 1,333 punches, which means he would be exerting around 23.8 tons of TNT per punch. The Enderman in hard mode does around 10.5 times the damage Steve does with his punch, meaning at a low end they would be exerting around 39,750 kilojoules, which is actually small building level. If we look at the middle end, this would be around 1.05 tons of TNT, which is building level, and if we look at the absolute highest, it would be around 249.7 tons of TNT, which is multi-city block level per punch. And if we look at their other abilities, they can obviously teleport, pick up blocks, and also they have the special ability in the Minecraft movie. When you look into its eyes, you seem to remember events in illusions with negativity. But let's get back to that teleport of theirs. which fires off instantly, especially when a ranged attack tries to hit them. And based on how hard we calculated Steve's punches, we can also calculate how fast he's actually shooting these arrows. And believe it or not, at a low end, these arrows would be traveling around Mach 39. The middle end would be around Mach 377, and the maximum end with the netherite breaking strength, we can actually get this all the way up to Mach 5815, making the Enderman quite a bit stronger and way faster than I last calculated on my channel, but let's see how these two measure up to each other. Starting with overall strength, 096 would still be much stronger even at a low end, with him casually getting into the building levels, while the Enderman would be casually getting into the small building levels. Yes, while the Enderman gets into the small building level arguably per punch, I should remind you 096 is also casually getting into the 1 TNT range just by running around slightly. And when looking at speed, it's actually kind of debatable. 096 is a little hard to measure since the most convincing argument he has is around Mach 7 with his 2-year travel time to the sun, and you can get him to Mach 67 based on how you view the sun shifting the orbit of the Earth. However, this isn't actually anywhere near to how fast the Enderman is. With the Enderman's reaction speed at a middle end would be around Mach 377, it would still be way faster. However, the Enderman isn't really doing this by travel speed, it's just its reaction speed, but due to that fact, Endermans could probably teleport and make it extremely hard for 096 to catch up, since it's reacting way faster than it can travel. Although 096 does appear to be able to get faster as things go along as he's chasing. However, the Enderman might not be blitzing 096 either, because 096 has a potential reaction speed of around the speed of light, if not faster, because of him being able to perceive someone looking at him before light even gets to their eyes. So you could argue that the Enderman can't really catch 096 off guard, but I will give it credit. Endermans are probably a bit more intelligent in this case, especially for a creature like it, with it actually incorporating teleporting into its fighting style and also just seeming to have more intelligence than the severely bloodlusted and crazed 096 when enraged. So it's actually hard to say if 096 would even be using its reaction timing in this case. However, due to the fact 096 doesn't really seem to ever tire out, it's unlikely he's going to get tired, let alone before the Enderman does. And in terms of power, the Enderman's multi-city block level punches are really good and more impressive than 096's basics. However, there is a massive issue at play, that being the sun shifting feat, or more accurately, 096 moving the sun closer to the Earth. There's a reason why I didn't bring this up in 096's analysis segment. Because in order for 096 to do what he did, which already breaks the laws of gravity by doing this, because there's nothing to actually push in the sun, but ignoring that, 096 would have to be exerting around 60 quetatons to do what he did, meaning 096 would be over 200 octillion times stronger than the Enderman. At this point, it doesn't even matter if 096 even gets any good speed feats and we keep him at Mach 7, or we don't give him his speed of light reaction timing into consideration, because the Enderman straight up isn't doing any damage that is going to matter to him. It probably can do some damage to the skin and flesh, but it's doing nothing to the skeleton, which is the most important thing for 096 in order for him to be taken out. While 096 obviously isn't exerting over 200 octillion times more force each punch, he would still be massively stronger to the point it wouldn't matter because he's still one-shotting the Enderman in most cases, or getting to a point eventually where he can just take out the Enderman. Even if we put 1 million Endermen versus 096, it would probably still end up with 096 winning. So this is an interesting fight indeed on paper, especially when comparing their lower ends. And it was fun coming back to this fight after a bit, but overall, yeah, this matchup isn't even close when we get into their higher ends. Both may be ridiculous threats in their games, and nothing to be taken lightly, but only one of them is truly unstoppable. SCP-096 wins.